Are you advising the Hillary campaign?
No.
Will you?
I see myself, Brett, as an intelligence professional, nonpartisan. I worked for 6 presidents, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats. I worked very closely with a Republican president, George Bush, and a Democratic president, Barack Obama. I am not going to be working for anybody's campaign.
Mike Morell, former acting director of the CIA, talking about his book, The Great War of Our Time. Let's start with the panel. Yochi Dreesen, managing editor of Foreign Policy, Juan Williams, columnist with The Hill, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer, who's the author of the book, Things That Matter. You may have heard of it. Well, it comes out today in paperback. We kind of like that book. We're back. What's up with this interview? Your thoughts, Charles?
Well, I thought the most telling statement is that what he says about Benghazi, that it was the most politicized national security issue he's ever seen. That's after 30 years. And he includes in that assessment the WMD assessment about Iraq, which I think he said rather plainly and unequivocally was the finding of the department. It was not a result of pressure or administration wanting a certain result. So I think those are really significant statements from somebody who was there. And on Benghazi, I mean, it really it raises a lot of questions that I think are the ones people are going to want to ask Hillary under oath in front of a committee.
Juan.
Well, I think that it's clear that he thought it was politicized, but politicized by the right is what he thinks. He thinks that it's become a political football, and as he says, the analyst made a mistake. It's what he told you, that it was not the case that he was telling the analyst or there was any White House effort to tell the analyst.
But there was the White House element of the Ben Rhodes email and the advice to Susan Rice to get on those Sunday talk shows and talk about a video.
That's a different issue.
That's politics on that side.
But he's talking about the analysis that, in fact, the attack was not connected to a terrorist attack at the first. But in fact, then he later understands that the analysts were wrong and it was a terrorist attack. And that's the critical element where he is a central player. When it comes to the talking points for Susan Rice, that's a different issue, and that's what you're talking about with Ben Rhodes.
But weren't you surprised to hear him say that essentially the White House was lying to reporters?
No, I don't think he said that they were essentially lying. I said he thinks that they were playing games, playing politics at some point, and he says he wishes he had spent more time on the issue.
Wait a second, Juan.
Okay.
He does say that he essentially thinks that they were lying. He says lying is a strong word.
Yeah, that's
I didn't believe what they were saying.
Correct.
Did they intentionally lie? I don't know. You have to ask them.
Right. So but that's not his impression.
All right, Yochi.
I was talking about 2 things. One, when you asked him about the failings of the State Department just on the security grounds that led to the deaths, he said, we, the CIA, upgraded it. And he said about the State Department, if that had happened at the CIA, the mistakes he saw them make, somebody would have paid the price with their career, which is really a damning indictment. But I think the key distinction, what he was saying, is between intent and fact. He was saying that Benghazi, the intent was not to lie, but that they got it wrong. And I agree with Juan. I think that is a major difference. And arguably, if you want to talk about Iraq, when he's saying this is worse than the Iraq failing, it comes down there too. I mean, on the left, you say that the Bush administration knowingly lied. On the right, they say it wasn't knowledge, it was a mistake, but it was not intentional. I think that, the intent against accuracy, carried through your whole interview with him.
What about the statement that this U.S. was not facilitating the movement of weapons to Syria, but he wouldn't comment about watching someone else do it?
Well, I think it's obvious what he was saying.
I mean, that's the most illumination we've had on that issue.
It is, and it's obvious his denial is actually an affirmation by silence, which is we were watching. Well, that's what the CIA is supposed to do. It's supposed to watch whether or not we had an interest in shipping those weapons out to the Syrian rebels who ended up, you know, a ragtag bunch that we didn't support at all and who sort of withered on the vine ever since is a separate issue. But the idea that we would establish a station, I mean, the weapons were pouring out of Libya all over the world. They ended up in Mali as well and a lot of other places. So of course you want the CIA on the ground. It's a legitimate thing. I can understand why he didn't want to comment on it, but he spoke volumes when he said, I won't comment on it. Obviously we were doing that.
Next up, an attendance problem. 4 out of 6 Gulf states leaders say no thanks to an invitation from the White House. We'll look at that. RSVPs to the White House were not that good because the White House had to spend the day saying how because King Salman from Saudi Arabia is not coming to Thursday's Gulf Cooperation Council meeting at Camp David, it is not an indication that things are deteriorating or that they're sending a secret message about the administration's efforts on Iran. That said, if you talk to experts who follow this stuff, many say that's exactly what's happening. We're back with our panel. Yogi, there's 4 out of 6 of the Gulf state leaders not coming. Obviously, they're sending people. They're sending representatives. They're still at the meeting. But what about this?
I thought the idea that the king would come was always a little bit strange. I mean, this was going to be one of the first trips he's made since becoming the top ruler of one of the most powerful countries in the world. That he would come as part of a group rather than individually always seemed a little bit off to me. But the notion that this is out of thin air is also kind of comical. What the White House was saying later today, which answered a big mystery, was that the Gulf states wanted a defense pact. They wanted the U.S. to say to them explicitly, if you're attacked, we will defend you. They wanted that in writing. The White House said that they had told the Gulf weeks ago they were not going to do this, and they said kind of cryptically, we reminded of them of that this past weekend. So this past weekend is when the Saudis first said he was going to come, then weekend ended, he's not going to come. You can rest pretty confidently that that conversation of, hey, let's remind you we're not giving you the pact you want so desperately, is probably why he's not coming.
And Juan, listen, we understand some of these leaders are older and they don't travel as much, and there's all kinds of back and forth about that. But on when the White House thinks they're coming and then they're not, it does send an interesting message.
A very bad message. I mean, because remember, I think a lot of this is optics, and not to engage in cliches about something so substantial and so critical as security in the Middle East. But I think the White House wanted to make a show of strength here, of being able to say that the Arab states were solidly in sync with what the United States policy is for both handling Yemen and for dealing with ISIS. And now I think there is some question, given the absence of the leadership. And it was, again, about having the leaders with President Obama, not the second in hand. I understand what you're saying about the age of the king, and I've seen reports and some, yeah, and some of the, he's 79, I think, and some of the agencies suggest Alzheimer's, but they wanted a show and they wanted the picture, and they're not going to get it.
Yeah, just moments ago, the White House put out a statement saying President Obama had a call with King Salman, and where the king expressed his regret, quote, at not being able to travel to Washington this week. Charles.
This isn't about geriatric travel problems. This is a loud statement from the Gulf states. You don't have to be an expert. You have to be about 11 or older to understand what this statement is. And it's not about Yemen. This is about Iran. This is a rejection of the agreement the United States is about to embark in with Iran by the states who are going to be very badly affected by it and who strongly object to it. The reason that the state leaders aren't coming is because what the United States is offering in return for acquiescing to an Iran deal that does what Obama has said to make Iran a successful regional power, which is anathema to all the Gulf states. The result of that would be a terrible blow against security of the Gulf states, and they are saying they will not be bought off with an agreement from the United States. Even if it were a written agreement, it wouldn't be worth the paper it's written on, given the history of this administration carrying out the promises and the threats it makes.
So that was my question. Yes or no, do they get a security agreement deal?
They're going to get nothing that's worth anything.
Oh, they'll get something. I mean, at this point, they need something, and they'll manufacture something.
Okay.
They'll get weapons. They'll get weapon sales that they've wanted for years, and they'll be eye-poppingly large dollar amounts, but they're not going to get a defense pact.
That is it for the panel, but stay tuned for sports history made this weekend. Finally tonight, NBA history made over the weekend with 3 buzzer beaters in 3 days. Wins by Chicago, Cleveland, and here in Washington made fans go wild.
Trying to get open, fires away. Bang! It's over! The Bulls win at the buzzer! James for the win. It's good! LeBron James at the buzzer!
Here comes Pierce with 5 seconds left. Pierce with 3. Pierce with 2. Pierce fall away at the horn. It's good! Paul Pierce does it again!
I still get goosebumps. A viewer tweeted this picture after the game. It's fair to say I'm pretty excited about that one. Thanks to Luke for the tweet. Wizards play Atlanta tonight. I'm from Atlanta, but still got to cheer for the home team. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That's it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid, except when it comes to NBA. Greta goes on the record right now.
This is a Fox News Alert. Super Bowl winning quarterback Tom Brady suspended 4 games. The Patriots quarterback will not play against the Steelers, the Bills, the Jaguars, and the Cowboys. And in the weirdest coincidence, his first game back is against the Colts, the very team that ratted him out and the Patriots out to the NFL. But that's not all. The NFL also fining the Patriots $1 million and 2 draft picks, including next year's first pick. The punishments come just days after the NFL's Deflategate report found Brady was at least generally aware the balls were deflated. And join us, former NFL quarterback and Washington Redskins Super Bowl MVP, Mark Rypien. Nice to have you, Mark.
The plot thickens, Greta.
The plot thickens indeed. So what do you think?
Well, I think that Tom will probably keep his innocence. He's the one throughout this that will be able to either sleep good at night or have a tough time sleeping at night. I don't think we'll ever get the full story of the whole situation, but I think the league found there was some collaboration between the footballs and Tom and the organization, and I think they want to scrutinize and basically do something to take a stance and say this is unacceptable, whether you did or didn't know. We have people that within the organization that are doing things that are going to enhance the play. So I think their stances has been well documented now, and so we'll see where this goes.
How sensitive are quarterbacks' hands? If you pick up that football when you were playing ball, could you pick up that football and do you have a sort of sense, having held one for years and years and years, whether that was inflated correctly or not?
I think so, but I just kind of, for me, it was always the same. It never changed. Football never changed. The only thing for me that ever was a problem was the amount of grit and silicone or whatever that I wanted to make sure the equipment managers were able to rub off, because the balls were really slippery when they came out of the box. And so I don't really recall ever having a ball that was deflated. I don't know what it's like to throw a football that was deflated, but I'm sure that if there was one that was, and significantly like they're claiming, that I think there'd definitely be an understanding that you would know what's wrong with the ball.
Is by any chance is Tom Brady a sacrificial lamb? And what I mean by that are all the quarterbacks sort of pushing up to the edge, and all the players on different aspects of, whether it's the kicker with the inflation of the ball. Is this sort of like the unspoken secret, or is this a big surprise to the players?
Well, I think just because of the nature that the quarterback is handling a football throughout the game the most, between the center exchange and the quarterback, they're always in arm's reach within that football. So I think because of that, there's got to be definitely a majority of the blame or understanding that they have an idea what is going on there. So and then kickers, I think there's always been the kickers have been scrutinized for inflating the ball too much versus deflating it. So because they're using it for the benefit of them and for an opportunity to help their team win. So I think they're going to stretch the rules as much as possibly can. In this case, I think they bent the rules, and the league needs to step in and make a statement.
What do you think of the punishment? Fair, harsh, lenient?
Well, I think it's hard to know. I think it's harsh enough to say, hey, we're going to monitor this. It's not going to happen under our watch. I think that's going to be the league stance, and I think that's going to be also what the Patriots will look at within their organization. The people that are involved, through equipment managers, through anyone that's going to be handling the footballs, everyone is going to have to pay attention to what's happening. So I think there's going to be definitely a league-wide statement made that's going to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Mark, thank you for joining us.
You bet, Greta. Thank you.
And joining us, New York Giants punter Steve Weatherford. Steve, nice to talk to you again and to actually see you. Steve, I went through this long report. I spent the weekend reading the NFL report. And you know what was the most stunning thing to me about the report? Is how the NFL came out smelling like a rose when in this report it has the Colts warning in writing in an email the day before that AFC game that the Patriots deflated the ball. And what did they do? They just sort of, shifted a bunch of emails around. But the NFL, in its wisdom, they knew this and they let it go down.
Yeah, it's very surprising, and the more that we're able to read into this investigation, Greta, the more obviously that is coming to light. But I don't know if this punishment that's handed down, which entails a 4-game suspension, which after he appeals it, I believe strongly that it will be reduced to 2 games. But let's say it's 2 games, Greta. You lose a first-round draft pick, a 4th-round draft pick, and $1 million. This is definitely a heavy-handed punishment handed down by our NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell, and he's definitely sending a very strong statement to the rest of the other 32 NFL franchises.
I know, but I think you've got to look at the big picture. The NFL is really, I think, under fire. I mean, after that, with Rice beating his then fiance unconscious, and the NFL sort of running for cover, acting like it didn't know anything, and then the fact that you've got the NFL in this report. I mean, they got tipped off by the Colts, and in this report, there's no penalty for the NFL because they are the NFL. They sort of own the game. But the NFL, to me, has got a lot of explaining to do why they didn't bother doing anything before the game. They knew exactly even who to watch for, but they didn't do that, according to this report. So, I don't know. I think the NFL needs to be put under a spotlight. Yeah.
I mean, I do agree with you. I mean, in the case of especially this situation, the NFL is the judge, the jury, and the executioner. And I think the NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell, has done a very good job in implementing discipline into the National Football League. But at the same time, there are definite situations where he has second-guessed himself. And there has been a lot of people who have second-guessed the punishments that he's given down, namely the Ray Rice situation. So, I think in retrospect, you have to go back and look at how difficult his job is. He's making one decision, and he's getting 1 billion different people to tear apart that decision.
Well, he's making one decision to the tune, at least in 2013, to $44 million compensation, Roger Goodell. And this is a tax-exempt organization, the NFL, which I don't understand that because, it sure is a money-making venture. If you pay $44 million to the commissioner in compensation in 1 year, I think you could probably pay taxes, to the American people.
Well, Roger Goodell actually does pay taxes, the National Football League.
That's right. Not. He pays taxes on his compensation, absolutely. But the NFL is tax exempt, and maybe this is at a time that that the NFL ought to look at itself, and maybe Congress may want to look at that tax exemption status because we're just seeing too many things. I mean, I realize it's separate from the Deflategate, but.
I agree with you, and especially from the tax standpoint. When you've got NFL or you've got soldiers that are fighting overseas and they're coming home and putting in work and they're having to pay taxes, and the National Football League is not, I think there's a serious problem there, Greta.
All right. In the report, it says that Tom Brady didn't fully cooperate and the Patriots didn't fully cooperate. So I suppose that's one of the reasons why the penalty was amped up a little bit. Agree?
Well, I think the reason that it was such a heavy punishment is not because he didn't cooperate. I think once they dug into it a little bit further, the fact that he lied and the fact that he tried to cover up his tracks and he wasn't fully cooperating. When you're in an investigation like this, it's never going to benefit you to fully cooperate and hand your phone over, hand your computer over. But when they found out that he wasn't cooperating and they found out all these text messages of him trying to cover up his track and inviting his equipment manager up to his quote-unquote office, which was the quarterback room. When I first initially heard that it is 4 games, a first-round pick, a 4th-round pick, and $1 million, I thought to myself, wow, that's pretty extensive. But I think the reason that it was this intense of a punishment was not because he deflated footballs. It was more of the fact that he didn't cooperate and he tried to cover up his tracks and he lied.
I'm told that the NFL is giving up its tax-exempt status, so I shouldn't be so heavy-handed on the NFL at that. So I'll take a pass on that. Okay, all right. Now here's part of the report, the investigation. This was sent to the NFL the day before from the Colts. The day before that game, it says. As far as the game balls are concerned, it is well known around the league that after the Patriots' game balls are checked by the officials and brought out for game usage, the ball boys for the Patriots will let out some air with a ball needle because their quarterback likes a smaller football so he can grip it better. It would be great if someone would be able to check the air in the game balls as the game goes on so they don't get an illegal advantage. That's what the Colts apparently wrote the NFL the day before this game. And what did the NFL do? What did the officials do?
Well, I don't
nothing.
think. Yeah, I don't think the suspension is because of his personal football preference. I do believe it's because he lied and he tried to cover his tracks. So, I mean, every football player, every quarterback, every kicker, every punter prefers his footballs to be in a certain fashion, not necessarily as far as the ball is inflated, but the way that the ball is brushed down and busted the ends in, et cetera.
Right. Well, my complaint there about the email was just that the NFL was warned, and then basically this unfolded and happened. Anyway, Steve, thank you. How was prom, by the way? Good?
It was fantastic, Greta. I'm a little bit sore. I haven't danced that long in a long time.
All right. And if anyone doesn't understand that question, they should have seen On the Record on Friday night. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Greta.
And joining us with more, Fox Boston sports director Tom Layden. Tom, the reaction there in Boston to this news?
Stunning. Greta, as you'd imagine, the people here are very shocked at just how far and how deep the suspension will go if it does stand on appeal. 4 games is incredible for a guy like Tom Brady. I don't think people are too surprised that the organization was fined $1 million because when you look at the track record, the fact that they were fined 8 years ago for the Spygate incident, the fact that that discipline was called into the case as they determined what to penalize the Patriots this go-around. I think the $1 million fine was not the biggest of the surprises, but 4 games for Tom Brady, which, let's not forget, also equates to a $2.1 million fine for him. That is pretty astounding.
All right. Is there any reaction? Am I the only one who's... I mean, I've gone through this report, and I see that the officials were warned the day before by the Colts, the day before the game. And there's actually been this, like, nobody else seems to be... I'm not saying that the Patriots shouldn't get a penalty or Brady, but what about these officials?
I agree with you. There are a number of things in that report that raise red flags to me as well. That one is one people have said, was it a sting operation? Were the officials and the league office told that this might happen, and the league office and the officials allowed it to happen, understanding that the Patriots would then be penalized? The other thing that really sticks out to me and has bothered me since I first read the report is the fact that Walt Anderson, who's a very accomplished referee, been there for 19 years, right? He basically took upon his own shoulders the responsibility of making sure that these game balls were going to be in good working order, understanding that that letter had come in from the Indianapolis Colts. And then 10 minutes before the game, Walt Anderson's looking around saying, where'd the footballs go? I mean, where's the accountability there? To me, I'm not excusing any activity that may have gone on from the Patriots equipment guys, most notably Jim McNally. But Walt Anderson does deserve some sort of scrutiny when you consider that he was the one who took it upon himself to make sure that nothing was going to be wrong with the footballs.
And am I correct in saying that the reason this even came to light was because during the first half, Brady threw an interception, the Colts had the ball, and then they checked the ball? That's sort of what all this started?
Yeah, and that happened during the first half of the AFC Championship game. But don't forget that these two teams played during the regular season, and that's where the Colts first had their red flags raised on their sidelines, because what their equipment guy said was, he likes to check the footballs that end up on their sidelines by turnover to just see how the other teams do prepare the footballs before the game. And he noted then that the Patriots ball seemed to be a little bit less inflated than it should be. So that's what made him take this up the totem pole and really raise the awareness of the people in the league office.
Tom, thank you for joining us. And be sure to stay with Fox News for the latest on the breaking Tom Brady news. And tonight, just 7 days out from the attempted terror attack in Texas, a scary new warning about more lone wolf terror attacks right here on U.S. soil. Adding credence to the warning is The Source, the nation's Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson.
We're very definitely in a new phase in the global terrorist threat, where the so-called lone wolf could strike at any moment, which is why the FBI, in my judgment, has done an excellent job of interdicting those who are attempting to travel to Syria, who commit overt acts in furtherance of material support to terrorism.
Former Congressman Lieutenant Colonel Allen West joins us. Colonel, your thoughts, the fact that the Secretary has, I think he's amped up the warnings a little bit. I mean, put some people on edge.
Well, I think that the Secretary of Homeland Security should have been a bit more attuned to what is happening here with the growing jihadist network that we have in the United States of America. We have to start seeing the United States of America as part of this 21st century battlefield, because when you're talking about militant Islamists and Islamo-fascists and the support network that they have, they don't recognize any borders. They don't recognize any boundaries. We should have been working with social media sites such as YouTube and Facebook and Twitter to eradicate the opportunities that these jihadists are using for those as propaganda platforms, and we have not done that.
So what do we do?
Well, I think first and foremost, the Homeland Security Secretary should sit down with those social media networks and talk about how we can start tracing these individuals and cutting down on the ability for them to use these platforms for recruitment and also to spread their messages. We need to develop through the U.S. Cyber Command a better way by which we can start deciphering these encryption messages that they are using once they get people drawn in. And we have to go back and let's be very honest, we have to do the trend analysis so we can have better surveillance instead of sitting back and waiting for the incident to occur. Out in Arizona, we knew about the young man who eventually drove 1,000-some-odd miles to come right here to Garland, Texas, and commit his atrocity or his planned atrocity. So we have to start peeling the onion back, and we have to start looking at those rocks that they are trying to hide underneath. We have to be proactive and not reactive.
You know, there's so many times that we have these terrorist attacks or attempted attacks that when we finally pick up the person, arrest the person, is we find out that they have been watched, whether it's the two brothers in Boston or whether it's overseas in Paris or whether it's these two in Texas, is that so far they all seem to have been on a radar screen.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Even Mr. Muttalib, Abdul Muttalib, who was the underwear bomber, we had intelligence warning us about him. Carlos Bledsoe, a young Memphis black man who was radicalized with Islam, traveled to Somalia, traveled to Yemen, got terrorist training, re-entered the country, and then went and committed a jihadist terrorist attack against the Little Rock recruiting station, killing one soldier. We know that Anwar al-Awlaki was exchanging messages with Nidal Hasan, but yet we still transferred him from Walter Reed Army Medical Center to Fort Hood, Texas. And we know what happened there in December 2009. So all of these things are going on. We have to get it right every single time. And I'm just very concerned that we have played a game of political correctness and we have not really put the spotlight on these, the sources from which these jihadists are finding their support right here in the United States of America.
Colonel, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Greta.
And here's a really dumb idea. In fact, it's also a very serious crime. It involves a boyfriend in ISIS. Tonight, a 29-year-old Virginia woman going to prison. Fox News chief intelligence correspondent is here to tell you all about it. Catherine Herridge joins us. So, who is this woman and what did she do?
Well, 29-year-old Heather Kaufman lived in suburban Virginia, and she pled guilty today to lying to the FBI about an international terrorism investigation. And in the statement of facts, it says for 6 months last year, she was using multiple accounts on Facebook, often under an alias, to support ISIS and, in effect, lure what she thought was a boyfriend to go to Syria and to become a martyr for this terror group. And I know that sounds crazy, but within that sort of culture...
It does sound crazy,
I know,
by the
okay,
way.
fine,
It does.
But within that culture, if you have a spouse who becomes a martyr, that gives you an elevated status. We saw that in the attack in France with Charlie Hebdo. Remember that guy, Amadi Coulibaly? He gives the big ISIS statement. Well, at that time, his common-law wife was heading into Syria. So it's almost like a badge of honor to have that kind of status.
So you have someone who wants to martyr himself and
Correct.
commit terror and be just a vicious, horrible person, and you have a girlfriend on the side who thinks this is a really good idea and wants to sacrifice, and wants to help you do it. I mean, that's what a combination. That's a couple.
It's crazy, but the thing that you see, and it's anecdotal, but based on our reporting, you see how the women really have an important role in the facilitation process and the network getting people into Syria. In this case in Virginia, 29-year-old mother is another example of that.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
And did President Obama just get snubbed by the new king of Saudi Arabia? Our political panel joins us. Plus, was it inappropriate? Baltimore State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby on stage with Prince at his Baltimore benefit concert. Why this could be big trouble for her. Our legal panel's coming up. Is it a snub? The King of Saudi Arabia suddenly announcing he is skipping President Obama's Wednesday Persian Gulf States Summit. No sooner did the King of Saudi Arabia say he wasn't coming than the King of Bahrain said he's not either. The main leaders from 4 of the 6 nations are skipping the summit hosted by President Obama at Camp David later this week. Fox's White House correspondent Kevin Corke, live in Washington. Kevin.
Greta, good evening, and I'm glad you mentioned that, too, because when you're talking about 4 of the 6 leaders that have been invited that are not coming, it does raise a lot of questions. Now, as for King Salman of Saudi Arabia, we just got a readout not long ago that said that he actually called President Obama to personally express his regret for not being able to make the event coming up Thursday at Camp David. The meetings obviously will continue and go on. He's sending envoys in his stead, men that are better suited to deal with the security conversations that will be happening. But I should also point out that despite that, his absence is clearly a blow because taken together, as you point out, 4 of 6, it makes you say, I wonder if there's sort of a regional feeling behind all this. Maybe the partners in the GCC don't subscribe to the fact that the U.S. is trying to work out a deal with, say, I don't know, Iran, for example. Now, if you're looking for pushback, here goes just a little bit from Josh Earnest, the White House press secretary.
I know that there have been some speculation that this change in travel plans was an attempt to send a message to the United States. If so, that message was not received because all the feedback that we've received from the Saudis has been positive.
Okay, so the feedback has been positive, Greta. That's according to Josh Earnest. But make no mistake about it, you're still talking about the Saudis have to deal with what's happening in Yemen with the Iranians, obviously giving arms to the Houthi rebels over there, and their constant meddling in the region. And then on the other hand, they're watching the White House do backflips to try to come up with a nuclear deal with the same people in Tehran. So I'm sure there are some bruised feelings on that end. You just won't hear that from the White House perspective.
Kevin, thank you. So is the Saudi king snubbing President Obama? Our political panelists here, Rick Klein, ABC News political director, and Ron Fournier, National Journal columnist. Rick, a snub, or is this an inconvenient time for the king?
It's a snub. We know clearly from even what the White House is now admitting that the Gulf states wanted something very particular out of this. They wanted to get a formal understanding in writing that there would be military retaliation. The United States would join in case of any further tensions with Iran. They weren't going to get that. I think the Saudis are very clear in the message that they're sending here. So whatever the stated reasons are and the diplomatic niceties, they know exactly how this is received, and the impact's going to be the same, is that President Obama is not going to have his peer, heads of state, for the most part, joining him at the summit.
Ron, I think this is one of the president's biggest nightmares of his presidency. If he can't get those Arab states, those Gulf states on board with this plan, because that means it will ignite a nuclear arms race, possibly. And they all hate the fact that Iran is going to have billions of dollars in cash when they lift the sanctions.
No, he's on a razor's edge here. He's trying to build his legacy by having a deal that might avert war with Iran, but this could easily tip the other way where the Saudis and their allies see that the United States is giving too much to Iran, emboldening Iran by taking away the sanctions and possibly allowing Iran to rush to nuclear weapons, which could create an arms race, which would be a horrible legacy for the president. He would go down as one of the worst presidents in our nation's history if this goes as bad as it possibly could. So he's on it, like I said, he's on a razor's edge. This could work out very well if we get a legitimate deal. But if it doesn't, we're in a lot of trouble.
But even a legitimate deal, what it does is it puts Iran out of the nuclear arms business possibly for 10 or 15 years, which is good news. That's the good news. But they have so much money, and they spend so much time with their money disturbing that region, whether it's Hezbollah or helping, or what they're doing in Yemen, or what they're doing in Syria, or what they're doing in the Sudan. I mean, if Iran has a ton of money, that scares the living daylights out of these Gulf states.
This is one of the biggest gambles that you can imagine in foreign policy. And the president knows what he's going up against with allies in the Gulf region. He knows what he's going up against with even some of his friends in Congress. That this is not a Congress that's on board for the same thing. And he's going to be leaving the next president with it. If he's right, the history books will have one thing to say. As Ron mentions, if he's wrong, it's going to be a much harsher judgment. But this, just even in the immediate term, the fact that this summit isn't what the White House hoped it would be, it's going to hurt the relations in the region. It also hurts the coalition building that has to happen here.
Because in fairness, there's a possible price to doing nothing. I mean, we might have to go to war with Iran, which would have its own set of cataclysmic consequences. So it's not an easy call, but I can certainly understand why people are very concerned about what he's done so far. He certainly doesn't have a great track record of being a great negotiator or being very honest and transparent with the American public. two things that are going to be really important here in the next few months.
And, of course, Israel doesn't want Iran having a lot of money either. I should have added that one to it.
Oh, definitely.
Panel, thanks.
Thanks, Greta.
Ahead, did she go way over the line? Baltimore State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, Sunday night on stage with Prince at his Baltimore benefit concert. Why this could spell trouble for her. Our legal panel is here next. Okay, what's up with this Baltimore State's attorney tainting the jury pool, is she? There are already accusations Marilyn Mosby has a conflict of interest in the case of 6 police officers charged in the death of Freddie Gray. And now, Mosby appearing on stage at Prince's Rally for Peace concert in Baltimore. Prince told everyone to wear gray in honor of Freddie Gray. Keep in mind, everyone at the concert is a potential member of the jury pool. Former D.C. homicide detective and defense lawyer Ted Williamson and former prosecutor Katie Fang join us. Ted, I now think she should step aside, but tell me what you think.
Well, I think perception is everything. There was absolutely no way whatsoever that Miss Mosby should have been on the stage at a Prince concert when she's prosecuting these police officers. These police officers are seeking justice also, and I'm very saddened by this. I think that she should be removed, but I think that it's going to be difficult to get her removed.
Katie?
I think that the state attorney, Marilyn Mosby, has a fundamental disconnect between what her job is and what she needs to be doing. She cannot get out of her own way. Nobody is suggesting, Greta, that Marilyn Mosby cannot have a personal life. My understanding is her husband got her these tickets because she's a big fan and it was for Mother's Day. Nobody's suggesting she can't have a personal life, but she really needs to be careful about the image that she's portraying. She already has several people saying that she has massive conflicts of interest, and I don't think what benefit could she have possibly thought she would gain by taking the stage when he's singing songs, Prince is singing songs called Baltimore, saying that there's no peace without justice for Michael Brown and Freddie Gray. It's completely outrageous that she's doing this.
You know, everyone has a First Amendment right, as we all know.
Sure.
And Prince called for the people to wear gray in honor of Freddie Gray. Nobody called for anyone to wear blue in honor of, the police officers, especially the ones who were, bravely hitting the streets during the riots and protecting the community. And the problem that I have is that at some point, you're almost trying to poison the jury pool so that someone can't possibly go into a courtroom and sort of set aside anything he or she has previously heard.
Well, the word almost I disagree with. I think you are actually poisoning the jury pool under these circumstances.
I think you're right. I shouldn't have used almost.
And I really believe that there is going to be, this trial is going to necessitate a change of venue in order for these police officers to be treated fairly.
I know, but even, Katie, the idea of a change of venue is you're not going to put this one in Wisconsin. It's got to be within the confines of the state of Maryland. And now, this thing has been so, everyone in Maryland knows about the streets of Baltimore practically burning down. Everyone knows about the troubles in Baltimore. And no matter what you think of anybody involved in this case, those police officers have a constitutional right to a fair trial, not a jury that's been in any way poisoned or tainted by the prosecutor. And she may not have done it deliberately, but by her stupid action, she's doing that. She's sending the message.
It's a very good point that you're raising. Whatever change of venue occurs, if they're successful in obtaining it, it's not going to be in another state. What I would like to opine just for a second is there has been a claim by her that Freddie Gray's attorney, Billy Murphy, or the family, for Freddie Gray, Billy Murphy is her mentor by her own admission. So maybe because he hasn't been mentoring her, maybe she doesn't really know what she's doing anymore, because I think that she needs to avoid the appearance of any type of suggestion that she has a bias towards this case in any way. And again, the hit parades just keep on coming. She just cannot get out of her own way.
And of course, what she doesn't realize is that every other case she's prosecuting, the people who are main witnesses are police officers, and she's sending a very bad message to all the police now, and the thousands of other cases.
Absolutely, and not only that, the prosecutor in Baltimore needs to understand she needs police officers. They're joined at the hip.
Anyway, Ted and Katie, thank you both. And a senseless, despicable crime, 2 police officers murdered in Mississippi. Ahead, Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant goes on the record. Mississippi, where 2 police officers viciously murdered, gunned down during a routine traffic stop on Saturday night. And just a short time ago, the 4 suspects, 2 charged with murder, appearing in court. Fox's Leland Vitter is live in Hattiesburg. Leland.
And Greta, things have changed over the past couple of hours. So far, there is 1 suspect who they have now charged with capital murder, 2 counts of capital murder against Marvin Banks. He is the alleged gunman at the traffic stop who has killed both of these officers. He right now is going to be held without bail or the possibility of bail, although he has not entered a plea because that doesn't happen for the next couple of days. The 3 other suspects, one of whom had been charged with capital murder, that charge is no longer there. All 3 of these people, female accomplice, Marvin's brother, and 1 other man, have been charged essentially with helping Marvin after the fact of the crime, being as after he shot these police officers. They have all been charged. They all 3 have the possibility here of bail. As it relates to Marvin, I talked to Marvin's mother earlier today. I said, well, what do you think about all these cases? She said, well, I think he did it. And on the night of the incident, which was Saturday night, that he was high on a number of drugs. And she went on to list all of the drugs that he was involved with and used on a very frequent basis. Today, also here in Hattiesburg, there was a moment before this initial appearance to remember the 2 officers, LaCorey Tate and Benjamin Dean. One a rookie, one a veteran officer. Dean at one point had been named Officer of the Year here for the Hattiesburg Police Department. It was an incredibly somber moment here, Greta, and I can tell you in that memorial service there was not a dry eye in the place, and that included mine.
Indeed, Leland, it's so tough for these police officers day in and day out. I can't even imagine what it does to the community, the other officers.
Well, that's very true. The community here is really shattered. The police chief said our heart is torn, and it didn't matter who you talked to here. There was an unbelievable and overwhelming sense of grief here. They may get justice at some point, but they will probably never get closure. The last time that a police officer was murdered here in Hattiesburg, Mississippi was more than 3 decades ago, and people can talk to you about it like it was yesterday. Keep in mind how small this community is, Greta. This morning, I was talking to a couple of gas station attendants. I said, how are you today? They said, oh, this is so terrible. This is so sad. I said, well, did you know the officers? They said, oh, yes, we knew the officers well. They came in here. And then they said, oh, yes, and we also know the suspects.
Yikes. Leland, thank you. Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant just attended the memorial for the slain Mississippi police officers. He joins us. Good evening, sir.
Greta, good evening. Thank you for having me.
Governor, this is the worst part about your job, and for all of us across America, as you know, just unthinkable what happened to those 2 officers. Just a routine traffic stop.
So tragic. And Greta, today we had a memorial service at 1 o'clock in Hattiesburg. Both the families of the slain officers were there, but also about 1,200 citizens, police officers, people who gathered together to honor the memory of these 2 courageous young men in the Hattiesburg Police Department, but also to embrace their families. What happens in Mississippi is this has brought that community together rather than separating them as so many people have thought that might do. It has brought everyone together in a spirit of understanding. As I met with those families and those 2 dear mothers who had lost their sons the day before Mother's Day, to see the difficulty that they are going through, but know this community is lifting them up.
Well, you know, and I'm glad that they're being lifted up. I know that also that this is probably particularly painful for you. You were a deputy sheriff long before you were governor, so you've worn the uniform. You get it. And you know, and what's going on across this country for so many police officers right now, they're feeling, many of them are feeling unappreciated. A lot of unrest in this country about it. And these 2 police officers, one was a rookie, and one I think was a father of 2 children. I mean, you know, how much? You know, this is just so horrendous.
It is, and again, to see those children, to know that Officer Tate, as you said, just graduated from the academy last year, June of 2014. Officer Dean married those 2 wonderful children now without a father. Greta, there is a criminal class in this United States of ours that somehow believes that they can go out now and try to take the lives or will in fact take the lives of law enforcement officers. And we must, the good people of this nation, the good people of Hattiesburg and Mississippi, must stand up and say that will not be accepted nor tolerated. Again, we are going to support our law enforcement officers here at every opportunity we have.
What did the family say anything to you? I mean, is there anything, I mean, like, you know, I don't know what you can say at a time like this, but you met with them. What did they say?
We told them